Snow falls across a field of ice. Men stand in a circle, eyes narrow, breaths heavy, fingers clenched around rough-hewn sticks. A ball is thrown. Moments later, blood follows. This was Viking sport, not a pastime, not a hobby, a proving ground. In the North, every game was war in disguise, a ritual of strength, cunning, and pride. To play was to survive, to win was to be remembered, because in a world where death waited behind every wave and sword swing, even play had to hurt. Stay with me till the end of this video, because the truth behind Viking sports is darker and deadlier than you think. What began as games often ended in blood. The Viking world was built on extremes. Endless winters, violent seas, and men who measured worth by endurance. Their games reflected that brutality. Every contest was more than entertainment, it was training for survival. Imagine life in a fjord settlement. Longships docked, warriors sharpening blades, women weaving by the hearth. And in the middle of it all, contests erupting in the mud, laughter mixing with war cries. Children wrestled to learn balance. Men tested strength with boulders and spears. Even festivals turned into exhibitions of dominance. Their motto was unspoken but clear: if you could not fight, you could not live. And among all their games, none revealed their spirit more than one savage spectacle, the game of Knattleikr. But Knattleikr wasn't just a sport, it was chaos wrapped in ritual, and sometimes it became murder. The sagas called it Knattleikr, the ball game. But don't let the simplicity of that name deceive you. This was no innocent pastime. It was war disguised as play. Picture a frozen Icelandic plain, the air so cold it cuts the skin. Men gather in furs and leather, faces red with frost, hearts pounding like drums. A wooden ball, hard as bone, is thrown into the air, and chaos erupts. They charge, they collide. Bodies slam, sticks swing, fists crash against faces. The sound is not laughter, but the grunt of survival. There were no rules, no referees to cry foul, only one law: win. Players fought to drive the ball past their opponents, using anything they could: hands, sticks, elbows, raw fury. Sometimes they played on ice, the ground slick and treacherous, adding danger to every step. The strong stayed upright, the weak fell and were trampled underfoot. The sagas say tempers often ignited like sparks on steel. Ribs cracked, teeth flew. When blood hit the snow, the crowd cheered. Because in Viking eyes, pain was proof of pride. One legend tells of Egil Skallagrímsson, a boy barely 12. Mocked during a match, he didn't sulk, he snapped. He struck his rival with an axe, splitting his skull open. And though the field fell silent, no one called him murderer. They called him a man. In Knattleikr, violence wasn't failure, it was glory, a test of endurance, loyalty, rage, and heart. Those who stepped onto that field knew. They might not all walk off it alive, but to die in the game was to die with honor. And if Knattleikr was chaos, another Viking sport would turn death itself into a ceremony. They called it holmgang, literally the island walk. A duel not fought in shadow but in public, before gods, law, and kin. Two men stepped into a circle drawn on the ground or onto an ox-hide square. Once they entered, only one would walk out with honor. The rules were precise, at least in theory. Each combatant was allowed a number of shields. Stepping out of the square meant forfeiture. The fight ended with blood or death. But over time, the ritual lost restraint. Men began to provoke duels over insults, money, or women. Blood spilled freely, and honor became entertainment. Think about that. In Viking society, dueling for your life was as common as modern sport. Holmgang blurred the line between sport and execution. It was justice through violence, sport through vengeance. And when the crowd gathered to watch, they weren't there to see who'd win. They came to see who'd die bravely. But beyond the duels and blood games, the Vikings also found sport in nature itself: racing, swimming, skiing, facing the elements that defined their world. The Norse did not simply endure winter, they trained with it. To them, the frozen world was not a punishment from the gods, but a proving ground. Every gust of icy wind, every stretch of blinding snow was a silent challenge. They learned to fight the ice with speed, skiing down mountains on wooden planks carved by hand, chasing elk and wolves through the white abyss. They fought water with strength, cutting across frozen lakes on skates made from sharpened animal bones, their breath clouding the air like smoke from battle. And they fought the cold itself with balance, diving into glacial rivers, locking their lungs in agony as they tested who could hold their breath the longest beneath the ice. It wasn't about fun. It was about control. Over body, over fear, over nature. Because in a land where winter could kill the unprepared, even play became a form of preparation. Imagine plunging into a river so cold it bit your flesh, your heart pounding like a war drum, while your friends screamed encouragement from the shore, not in pity, but in pride. In the Viking world, pain was a teacher, endurance was status, and those who quit, who surfaced too soon, carried shame heavier than armor. Yet, when the day ended and frost clung to their beards, the warriors of the North sought another kind of trial, one that required not muscle, but mind. As firelight flickered across longhouse walls, they gathered around wooden boards carved with runes. Here, under the watchful eyes of Odin, they waged quieter wars, games of kings and killers, where strategy replaced swords and victory demanded something rarer than strength, wisdom. By candlelight, warriors gathered around carved boards. They called the game Hnefatafl, the King's Table. A game of strategy, simple in design, brutal in philosophy. One side defended a king trapped in the center. The other, attackers from all sides, sought to capture him. It was chess before chess existed. A game that taught patience, cunning, and sacrifice. To win, you had to think like a warlord. To lose meant more than defeat. It meant humiliation. And as they played, the Vikings rehearsed war in miniature. Every move was a whisper of fate, reminding them that even kings fall when surrounded. Speaking of kings and fate, if you're enjoying this journey into the violent heart of Viking sport, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because the next chapters of this series will uncover more forgotten rituals and blood-soaked games that shaped our world. Now, while some Vikings schemed on the board, others wrestled in the dirt. Knattleikr, Holmgang, Glima wrestling. These weren't random amusements. They were the heartbeat of Viking society. Every game revealed who was brave, who was loyal, and who was weak. A victory could earn you followers. A loss could ruin your name. Games often reflected feuds. One insult during a match could ignite a blood feud that lasted generations. In the sagas, entire clans fell apart because a ball game went too far. Competition was never just about skill. It was about status. To win was to command respect. To lose was to invite mockery. That's why even simple games, stone throwing, horse racing, arm wrestling, carried weight. Every contest was an echo of battle. But among these brutal amusements, some were darker still. Some pushed the boundaries between sport, cruelty, and spectacle. Few things embodied Viking spirit like Glima, the wrestling of the gods. It wasn't just strength that mattered, it was balance, grace, and respect. Contestants locked hands, trying to trip or throw each other without brute violence. It was said that even Thor and Loki practiced it. But not all contests were so noble. They made horses fight, sometimes to the death. It wasn't mindless cruelty. It was believed to reveal the divine will, the strength of lineage that had the worth of warriors who owned them. And when men threw axes or hurled boulders for distance, they weren't showing off. They were proving readiness to gods, to kin, to death itself. In the Viking world, even peace was preparation for war. But when the battles ended, when the games were won or lost, the warriors didn't go home quietly. They celebrated like conquerors. When the duels ended and the games grew quiet, the longhouse came alive. Great timber doors swung open, spilling warmth and light into the frozen night. Inside, torches roared against the walls, and the smell of roasted meat filled the air. Boar, venison, and the sweet burn of mead. Here, the warriors gathered not as enemies, but as brothers of the storm. Laughter shook the rafters. The sound of fists hammering on oak tables echoed like drums of war. Drinking horns clashed, songs rose, rough, wild, and full of pride. Songs that told of raids, of gods, of lovers long lost to the sea. But feasting was never just about food or song. It was another battlefield, a test of endurance, of reputation. Who could drink the most without falling? Who could boast of deeds so great that silence followed his words? Every toast was a challenge, every boast a weapon. And in that fiery glow, a man's worth was measured not only by the strength of his sword arm, but by the weight of his legend. Yet beneath the thunderous joy, there lingered something quieter, a tension. Because everyone knew that tomorrow, the same men laughing side by side might meet again, not across a table, but across a blade. The Viking feast was both a celebration and a reckoning. Each song, each drink, each roaring cheer was a defiance against death, against the cold, against time itself. As the night deepened and flames danced in their eyes, the games of the day became sacred memory, a ritual where blood and laughter merged, reminding every warrior of the fragile, furious beauty of being alive. For the Vikings, sport wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. They believed every contest echoed the struggles of the gods, Odin's endurance, Thor's strength, Loki's cunning. When a man fought well, he honored his ancestors. When he played fiercely, he called upon the gods themselves to watch. Sport was a prayer, performed not in temples, but in action. It proved a man's worth for Valhalla. Each victory whispered a promise. When you die, you will dine with warriors. But to earn that seat, you had to fight for it, in life, in battle, and even in play. Today, centuries later, echoes of those ancient games remain. In Iceland, Glima is still practiced, Hnefatafl is still played, and Viking reenactors still battle on fields of snow, honoring the same values their ancestors bled for. But their legacy is more than sport. It's a philosophy, that life itself is a contest, that strength, endurance, and honor aren't just virtues, they're survival. Because in the North, every breath was a battle, and every game was a reminder that even in play, the Vikings were never far from war. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden world of Viking sports, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the bell. And if you want to know what happened when Vikings accused their wives of infidelity, click the next video on your screen. Because in the world of the Norse, betrayal was the deadliest game of all.